I did it! I graduated. As of Monday, I finished all the schoolwork I needed to get my degree, so I'm officially a graduate. I technically haven't walked yet. If you're watching this on premiere day, then I walk later today, but yeah, it's everything school-wise is done. I don't want to take up too much time at the beginning, but getting my degree was one of the largest daunting tasks I had for the longest time. And yeah, it took a little longer than expected through financial troubles, COVID, family struggles, but yeah, it's done. I did it! I'm finished with school until I decide to get my master's, but yeah, it's gonna be a little bit before I do that. So yeah, just wanted to give that quick update. Anyway, on to the video. Heyo everyone, me should be barking here. I'm sure this is the least controversial thing I could say, but most furries are part of the LGBTQ umbrella to some degree. I'm gay, my editor is also gay, my stills artist is non-binary and ace, I could go on. It's no surprise that there's a large tie between furry and LGBT, but why is that? Is there a distinct reason for this connection, or is it just a coincidence? Today we're gonna dive into both the histories of furry and LGBT and see if we can find any connections between the two groups. So without further ado, let's dive on in. Now, the entire history of the LGBT movement is way too vast to cover in one video, so I'll be giving a brief synopsis of it. It's also going to be entirely focused on the US history because that's where I live, so apologies if you live elsewhere, and let's get into it. The earliest iteration of an LGBT term being used seems to be in William King's book The Toast in 1732, using lesbian to mean woman who loved woman. Now, obviously queer people existed long before these terms came to be, but it's kind of crazy to think that these terms have been written and used for hundreds of years. It's almost like it's not a phrase, and that the youth isn't just making it all up, but I digress. Homosexual was first used in 1869 by Hungarian journalist Karl Maria Kertény, which was 155 years ago. Bisexual has two prominent early uses. In 1984 in the pamphlet Psychopathia Sexualis, which had the term bisexual in it when translated from German, and in 1967 when the Sexual Freedom League formed in San Francisco in support of bisexual pride. Gay was later than I expected, being used in 1955 to mean same-sex relationships between men. The late use may be due to gay being used long before then to mean happy. Last but not least is transgender, used in 1965 by John Olivan in his book Sexual Hygiene and Pathology, to mean a person who identifies with a gender other than the one they are assigned at birth. So LGBT has certainly shown up in literature for a long time, but they definitely weren't accepted in the United States for a very long time. We can't go over all the history because we don't have time, but one of the biggest turning points for LGBT rights was the Stonewall riots on June 27th through the 29th, 1969. The Stonewall Inn was a gay bar in New York City that endured an unwarranted police raid on Saturday morning. After this, over 400 members of the LGBT community protested their treatment and pushed the police back away from the Stonewall Inn. For the following 6 nights, the rioting continued and was pivotal in the following years for gay rights across the nation. Notable people such as Sylvia Rivera, Martha P. Johnson, Seymour Pine, and Craig Rodwell would continue to tell their stories from the riots, and odds are you've probably heard of one or more of these people. The Stonewall riots led to the creation of the Gay Liberation Front in New York. The following year, the first Pride marches were held in multiple cities across the nation on the anniversary of the riots. In 1974, we would see our first openly gay state legislature, Elaine Noble, who served in the Massachusetts State House of Representatives for 2 terms. All of this progress wasn't entirely met with open arms, however, as we would see in 1977. Anita Bryant, a former singer and Miss America pageant winner, created the group Save Our Children in protest of a Florida ordinance which would prevent discrimination against homosexuals. It's interesting to see that even 47 years ago, anti-LGBT people were using kids as a scapegoat for their own bigotry. I'm noticing a pattern here. Anyway, the law was unfortunately repealed. In response, gay and lesbian activists heavily condemned this action and boycotted Florida Citrus Commission products, whom had Bryant as a spokesperson. This caused Bryant to be fired in 1980, and 28 years later, a new ordinance was passed to protect LGBT people. This was one of the first early examples of the LGBT community realizing the political power they had. This led to various bills against gay people to be shot down, one of which being the Briggs Initiative in 1978, which would have banned LGBT people from working in public schools. Unfortunately, what would follow is the AIDS epidemic, which swept the nation in 1981, affecting countless people and taking the lives of 583 through 2007. Men, women, adults, and children were all affected by this horrible disease, but due to slanderous people in office at the time, gay people got the majority of the blame. Yes, I'm talking about Reagan here. It's actually insane how many current national issues we are still dealing with stem from this awful person holding office. Like, not even just LGBT issues, an unreal amount of problems branched from Reagan's presidency. Now, I know some of you are gonna start typing angry comments about how great of a man Reagan was, and to those people I say, fuck you. Go ahead and leave that one uncensored, Gavin. And leave this in the video too. Go ahead, throw a black screen over it. Unfortunately, we're not done with the negative history points. The following story contains an awful hate crime, so if you'd like to skip it, you can skip to the timestamp on the screen now. In 1998, a man named Matthew Shepard, who was a 21-year-old attending the University of Wyoming, was brutally beaten and tied to a fence in a field, and was left to die due to being gay. Unfortunately, this would be his fate several days later, succumbing to his injuries. This is one of the worst anti-gay hate crimes in America and led to the Hate Crimes Prevention Act being established in 2009, which was a federal law against biased crimes directed at LGBT people. Recent history has been a lot more progressive for the LGBT community, however. Though in 2008, we would see the state of California declaring that marriage is between a man and a woman, known as Proposition 8. This would be heavily challenged in 2013 with Hollingsworth versus Perry and California Proposition 8, and US versus Windsor and repeal of the Defense of Marriage Act. Hollingsworth v. Perry was ruled that the Supreme Court could not overrule the decision of the California Supreme Court, and that the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment doesn't prohibit California from defining marriage as between a man and a woman. US v. Windsor, however, was ruled that defining marriage in such a way was unconstitutional under the 5th Amendment of Equal Protection. This decision led to the Defense of Marriage Act of 1996 to be considered unconstitutional. Both of these rulings were reached on the same day in 2013. This breakthrough led to Obergefell versus Hodges in 2015, which ruled that the right to marry is guaranteed to same-sex couples. In other words, 2015 was the year that it became law that all states allow same-sex couples to legally marry. That's where I'm going to leave it off, but if you'd like a more in-depth history, check out the link in the description below. It's got many more moments I skipped over for time's sake. Let's pivot a bit and discuss the furry fandom's history. Anthropomorphism has been a thing for as long as we've been around, and we see this in ancient art made by humans. Furry, however, mainly branched off of nerd culture, and one of the earliest examples of this was in 1985. Judy Niver, while attending San Diego Comic-Con that year, hosted a party in their room to promote and celebrate anthropomorphic animal media, and to get to know others with similar interest in this topic. There was a large interest in this, and it became a staple to host a furry party every year, later being called CritterCon Diego and Califur Diego. In the same year, Mark Merlano, whom we widely know as Cy Sable, and his longtime partner Rod O'Reilly would also host a similarly themed party at the WesterCon Science Fiction Convention in Sacramento, California. Cartoons such as Animal Olympics and short cartoons from Warner Bros. Containing furry artwork and short stories were playing for people to watch, and people whipped out their sketchbooks to share their own furry art. This party happened the following year as well, and was the first year it was openly labeled a furry party. This shared interest caused a group of fans to arise in the mid-1980s and have various parties, meetings, and other types of activities. These furry activities were still linked to much larger events for the most part, as the internet was a lot smaller and less accessible than today. That said, these weren't small meetings, with San Diego Comic-Con parties becoming too large for even double suites. Due to this, Mark and Rod decided to branch off the Comic-Con and host a convention with more of a furry focus, Conference Zero, hosted in Costa Mesa, California on January 21st to 22nd, 1989. This first ever FurryCon saw an attendance of 65 attendees. That sounds like a small number, and compared to the Comic-Con it had its roots in, it is. But this was the birth of the community we all know and love today. It was also a lot harder to promote the event for people to attend, because while today we can find any info we need on any cons, it was a lot harder to do that with the primitive internet of that time. Conference would continue until 2003, and is one of the longest running furry conventions alongside Eurofurence and Anthrocon, a con that I'll be at in a few weeks, so maybe I'll see you there. Furry today is made up of a majority of people in the LGBT community and has become a safe haven for those to find others like them. The community encourages exploration of yourself without the fears of being judged like you would in any other community outside of furry. There's tons of people, myself included, who contribute finding their true self to being in the furry community and having that freedom to explore. Misha identified as gay long before I did, and it was a great base for me to explore that label and identity, and it all felt right, leading to me coming out in 2021. Depending on the study, we typically find that at least 70% of the fandom identifies as LGBTQ+, and some of our latest studies indicate that about 25% of the fandom identifies as gender diverse, says Dr. Sharon E. Roberts, whom was a co-founder of the International Anthropomorphic Research Project. Take Mabel, for example, who found the community through DeviantArt after seeing, quote, cool anthro characters. She soon started incorporating furries into her creative writing. Years later, she would create a tigress persona, who she described as nerdy and kind. This allowed her to explore the concept of gender identity and made her realize and learn that she was trans. The only other space I could compare the furry community to is a local LGBTQ+ community in terms of how accepting it is and how much it lets you just openly be yourself, she says. Heavy bullying may have also led a lot of people to find the furry community. Many furries are or were victims of bullying in their day-to-day lives, which led to them seeking refuge in online spaces, which in turn leads to them finding the community and a place to freely express themselves, and any feelings they may have been repressing. Another group that often gets targeted for bullying is, drumroll please, nerds. That's what led to them creating conventions for their interest and finding online spaces to freely talk about themselves and the things they love with other like-minded individuals. Furries are much of the same, so it's really no wonder that furry started as small room parties at comic and sci-fi cons. And the parallel of wanting to express yourself freely without judgment and being unapologetically you is the key factor in why we see so many queer and trans furries. The entirety of LGBT history has been those before us fighting for the right to express and be themselves in the face of a hating world. And it can't be understated how much of an impact they've had on all of us. Had it not been for them, a gay couple likely wouldn't have been able to host a furry convention, and the community as we know it likely wouldn't have existed. We recently lost one of those two people credited for founding today's furry fandom, Cy Sable, back in February 20th of 2024. This was felt all around, and we lost a pillar of the community that has led so many of us to finding our happier and better selves. I think it's beautiful that he got to see the community he started flourish into the worldwide phenomenon it is today, and for him to have taken part in creating a space for young LGBT people to safely and freely explore themselves without judgment. Sigh, from the bottom of my heart, thank you. So we're to the end of the video. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you to Gavin for editing this long video. I knew it was going to be a big project when I started, but it just kept going, so thanks for the help, and especially for when I was in school. I couldn't have kept the videos going without you. Be sure to check out his channel in the description, as well as the sources used in this video. Like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!